Hello and welcome to Spread Book Joy. I'm going to give you some tips on how I managed to maintain and improve my reading habits over the year. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack. I'm a qualified primary school teacher who gives her opinion and recommendation on great books for home or school. Today is not going to be about specific books, as I've said, it's going to be on my top tips for reading. I'm going to give you my top 10 tips for maintaining good reading habits, for building and maintaining good reading habits. Tip number 1. Set a reading goal. Now, every year I set a reading goal. I use Goodreads. If you're not familiar with Goodreads, it's a social media platform specifically for reading. You can join for an account, is free. You log into it and you can start cataloguing your reading. You can rate your books, you can review the books, you can just record the date you read the books. And I've been keeping a record of my reading for about 5 or 6 years on Goodreads. And you can also set yourself a reading goal for the year. Now, normally I read between 50 and 60 books a year. This year I read 84 books. I'm not including picture books because I read a lot of those, or academic books because I do some studying as well. I haven't included any of those things, just my fiction chapter books, non-fiction books, adult and middle grade, anything from middle grade up really I've recorded. If you're someone like me who gets a lot of pleasure out of seeing a number rise like that, if you get a lot of pleasure from ticking things off on lists, then I can't recommend setting a reading goal highly enough. If you're really worried about putting too much pressure on yourself, then make it an achievable goal. If you feel like you've not read a book in a long time, just set one book as your goal. Setting targets is really useful for tricking your brain as well. So if you set something really achievable, so say for instance, for example, if you don't want to study, if you tell yourself you're going to study for 10 minutes, you'd invariably say that's fine, anyone can do 10 minutes of study and you'll study for more. Granted, if you say I'm going to read one book this year, and you set yourself a target of one book, I guarantee you'll exceed it. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, track your reading. This goes along with setting goals. So track it in Goodreads, use a pen and paper tracker, a blog, however you want to do it. Track your reading, record the books that you read, give them a rating, maybe write a few notes about them. That also has an added bonus of helping you remember more of what you read. Because I read so much, I forget half of the things I read. So one of my big aims for starting this channel, for starting my website and my blog, has been to record my thoughts on what I read, and that helps me to remember more of what I read and take more notes on what I read. Tip number 3, since I joined the online book community, I've discovered readathons and challenges, so I would suggest trying one out. One of my favourite ones, generally they're around a theme, but you don't have to be around a theme, but one of my favourite ones that I first discovered through Goodreads is the Book Riot Read Harder Challenge, which I'll put a link to the description box in the description box below. Now that isn't around a theme, that's just designed to get you to read harder, to push yourself out of your comfort zone with reading. It doesn't mean read harder as in read harder books, but it just means try and expand your horizons. So for instance, this year's Read Harder Challenge for 2020 included categories like read a middle grade book by a queer author, read murder mystery where the victim was not a woman, and that kind of thing. There's about 40 different challenges in the Read Harder Challenge, and there it might be to read a book of poetry, because sometimes we don't read poetry. You know, one of them this year was read a book on climate change and that kind of thing. Now, I don't fulfill the Read Harder Challenge every year, but what I enjoy about it is it gives me an opportunity to look at books I may never have picked up. So that's a wonderful challenge, and I'll link that in the description box below. But you can do readathons around everything. I took part in my first one this year. I did the Jane Austen July readathon, which is hosted by Katie from Books and Things and Marissa from Blatantly Bookish. They're 2 of my favourite YouTube channels, and they talk about classics a lot. So I love Jane Austen. I took part in Jane Austen July. I discovered it through my favourite YouTube booktuber, who is Spinster's Library, who I also link all these people in the description box below. They're fabulous, you should check them out. But Jane Austen July was wonderful. There are categories like read a non-fiction book biography about Jane Austen, read some of her juvenilia, some of the things that she wrote when she was younger that are not her novels, and I really loved it. So I expanded my horizons a bit. I didn't get through all of my criteria, but it's a great way to create TBRs. Now, if you're new to the online book community, TBR stands for to be read, and it's become kind of shorthand for any list of books that you're planning to read. So creating TBRs, compiling TBRs, making TBR videos, it's all part of the online book community. So creating TBRs is great fun. And especially if you join an online community, you'll learn a lot of new titles and new things you may never have thought of before. Tip number 4, ironic I'm talking to you about it on YouTube, is reduce your tech distractions. There's proof that if you even have your phone anywhere in your eye line, it will reduce your cognitive capacity. I've written a blog post on all these tips, which I'm going to link below, and you can find the information about this research in that blog post. So if you even have your phone face down next to you, you will be distracted by it. They're designed to distract you, they're designed to be addictive. Apps, smartphones, all of these things, much as they've improved our lives immeasurably, they've also reduced our capacity for concentrating and focusing. So I'd suggest reading Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, which is a fantastic book, and that's also in this blog post. So all of this information I'm giving you is in my blog post, which I'll link in the description box below. But I don't have any screens in the bedroom if I can help it, unless it's a Kindle. Though if you are someone who reads on your phone or your tablet, I would suggest investing in an e-reader or setting screen downtime where the only app available is your e-reading app of choice. Not always easy, I know. So this is one I really struggle with, and it's to try and be intentional with my TV and internet use. So I've set a screensaver on my phone this year which says, what would you rather be doing? Because quite often you pick up your phone and you aimlessly scroll through it. You get sucked into Instagram or social media, or you get sucked into doing silly online quizzes on Facebook. If you find yourself doing those things, aimlessly scrolling, looking at Netflix but not knowing what to watch, then you could be reading. Try to be a bit more intentional about your internet and TV use. Set some daily screen downtime. I don't know how it works on Android phones. I haven't had an Android phone in a long time, but you can do that on your iPhone or your iPad. You can set some daily screen downtime. I've got links in my blog post about how you can do that. And finally, this is one that I'm going to work on every single day this year, unless I'm late getting up for something and I have to rush off somewhere. If I get time to have a coffee in the morning, I'm not going to look at my phone, I'm not going to read my emails, I'm not going to look at the news. The first thing I'm going to do is read a few pages of my book with my coffee. Now, that's a much nicer start to the day than reading stressful news and stressful emails and getting your head in that workspace before you start. So you get a few pages a day done, much nicer way to start the day, and extra time for reading. My 5th tip for you is to mix up your formats. So we know you can read books, traditional paper books, e-readers, and you can also listen to audiobooks. Now, before anyone gets into whether audiobooks are real reading, of course they're real reading. You're still having to comprehend what you're listening to, you still take in the same information. If you finish the entire book, then you can actually say you have read that book. So before we get into the arguments about audiobooks, they are real reading. So what I tend to do is mix up my formats. I indulge in buying myself one copy, particularly of big books, in multiple formats so that I can read it and pick it up wherever I am. Now, I know this isn't for everybody, but these are my tips and how I maintain my reading habit. Now, I don't do that for every book. That would be ridiculous. I don't do it for every book, but I do it for big, weighty, particularly fantasy books like Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, which if you're reading is fabulous, by the way, but it's massive. So that's one of my tips. So what I can do is I can switch between reading my paperback to reading, listening to it while I'm cooking or driving or whatever. And I find I get through bigger books quicker that way. The other thing I would suggest is if you don't have money for audiobooks, if you don't have an Audible subscription, get the Libby app. If you're in the UK, and I think they use Libby in America as well, but that's the library app, which in London, all the London libraries certainly use. It's amazing. I discovered it during lockdown when my library was closed. And also, please do support your local library. Ours is still shut, sadly, but this is why I've discovered Libby. You can see if they've got the ebook, or you can see if they have the audiobook. I've been trying to re-listen to the Discworld books, and you just need to place a hold on them, and they're completely free on the Libby app. So I get to listen to them on the Libby app rather than spending 40 credits on all the Discworld novels. So that's another suggestion for you. Also, if I'm not a real book purist. I adore real books. I adore them as objects. I just love holding a real book. I love reading from a real book. It's my choice. My preference would be to have everything in paperback or hardback. But hardbacks in particular, they're not very portable. I find if I've got something in hardback, it can sit there for ages before I get a chance to read it. So that's why I find having different formats, being able to swap between the Kindle, swap between paperback, go out and listen to my audiobook when I go for a walk. I find that means I get a lot more reading done and I can focus on a book and get through it quicker. Number 6, this is kind of a little mantra that I learned from Ryan Holiday, who is an author who does a lot of non-fiction, but he reads a lot and he sends out a regular reading email where he talks about the best books he's read. Now, he wrote a blog post, which I am linking in my blog post, which I read years ago, and ever since reading this, it's changed the way I think. So he is determined that if there is a book that he wants to read, nothing will stop him from having it. And that's because he prioritizes reading above everything else that he does. So if you are someone who prioritizes reading, and I wholeheartedly agree with him, I'd rather be reading than not reading, and I'd love, you'll never be sorry for doing more reading. So he will get any book that he wants, he will make sure he gets it come hell. Now, he actually said if he had no money, he'd steal books, but I'm not advocating that. But what I would suggest is, so try living by that mantra that, life is short, by the book. So I've seen everywhere life is short by the dress, but for me it's life is short by the book. If there's something you're really, really excited to read, you're more likely to read it. So if there's something out there and you're like, oh, I'm dying to read that, get it. If you have no money, try the library. Libraries will purchase new and noteworthy titles if you can't find them in there, if you request it. There's also, like I said, the Libby app, fantastic, because you can just place a hold. Even if it's a really popular book, you'll get it in a few weeks' time, but there are always ways around not having the money for the books. I also set up a wish list when I spent a few years there saving really hard and trying to pay off some student debt and things like that, and I had no money, so I set up a wish list with books on for gifted books, because that's all I would want for birthdays and Christmas, or book vouchers. So you let all your friends and relatives know, if you're going to get me anything, I just want book vouchers, or I want something off this list. So that's another way of doing it. But yeah, life is short, buy the book. Tip number 7, I used to be a die-hard finish the book, I've started it, so I'm finishing it reader. Life's too short for that. I'm now what I call mood reader. I will put a book down if I'm not enjoying it. Doesn't mean I'm not going to pick it up again, but at that point it may be I've decided I'm not in the mood for Jane Austen anymore, or whatever it is anymore, so I'm going to put this down until I'm ready to give it my full undivided attention. If I can't stand a book, if something's annoying me about a book, I will put it down. I will DNF it, as the online book community says, which is do not finish. So I've got a DNF list on Goodreads. So if I say I'm reading a book on Goodreads, if I don't like it, it goes on my DNF. But mood reading is how I get a lot of my reading done. If you're not enjoying a book, life's too short. There are too many good books out there. Why would you persevere with a book that you hate if you've got all these other wonderful things out there? And life is short. The older you get, the more you realise this, which is why the older I've got, the more I've become a mood reader. Tip number 8. Now, this is randomly how I discovered the online book community. Speed reading. I wanted to be able to read faster. I thought, well, if I can read faster, I'll be able to read more, or read more books. And I looked up how to read faster on YouTube, and I found a video, which will be linked in my blog post, by Murphy Napier, who is an online booktuber, and she had taken a course on Skillshare on speed reading and explained how it was done. So I discovered her, she's the first booktube channel I discovered, and I started watching her, and that's just led me down a rabbit hole of this online book community, which I absolutely love, and led me to start my own channel. So what I would say is speed reading is not my preferred method of reading. It's something you have to practice. It's a case of, if you're an experienced reader and you're not a child who needs to sound out every word or look at words carefully to sound out unknown words, if you're a mature reader, then you are sight reading, so you recognise each word. You're not reading it, you're not sounding it out, you see it, you visually remember it, you're recognising it. So when we read, a lot of us will bounce our eyes from one word to the next, to the next, to the next. Speed reading is where you're bouncing your eyes off 1 or 2 points in a line of text, and you're seeing 4 or 5 words at a time and reading them all at once. It sounds a bit more complicated than it is, but I'm going to link the video in my blog and you can have a little look at it. But it takes practice, but you can do it, and I've got better at it. I don't choose to use it if I'm really enjoying a book. I really like savouring a book. I want to read word for word, but you can get better at it. You can train yourself to do it, and it's a really useful skill. My next tip was also a YouTube one. This is tip number 9, is to listen to audiobooks at a higher speed. The first time I tried it, I was thinking, absolutely not, this is awful, how can anyone do this? I'm missing half the information. So what I did was I started gradually listening at 1.2 times the speed instead of 2 times the speed, or some people listen at 2.5 times the speed. I don't know how they do that. Crazy. But so I just increased a little bit at a time the amount that speed that I was listening to the book at. Now I have listened to a fiction book at 2 times the speed. I did understand all of it, and I did get through it really obviously twice as fast, but I didn't really enjoy it like that. So I don't tend to listen to fiction at too fast a speed. I can sometimes, depending on the narrator as well, if the narrator's quite slow paced, I will up it to sort of 1.2, 1.5, I think it's a 1.2, I can't remember what the speeds are on Audible that I listen to, but you can up it sort of incrementally. The most I'll listen to a fiction book at the moment is about 1.5 times the speed, but it's not my choice. I like to savour a fiction book, but I definitely put the speed up for non-fiction and for YouTube videos and for online classes, because if you put the speed up, you'll get the information as quickly as possible. Really handy skill. My final tip, which is the most important tip, and it's not really a tip, it just makes complete sense. You reframe your mindset. If you want to read more, you have to choose to read more. And one thing that helped me with this is Abdaal, who is a great productivity YouTuber who is linked in my blog. And he said that he doesn't say, I don't have time anymore in relation to anything. He always says, I'm choosing not to make the time. So for instance, if you're telling yourself I don't have time to read, reframe it to I am choosing not to have the time. I'm choosing not to make the time to read. And that's much more powerful and less forgiving than saying you don't have time. You're choosing not to make the time. So you must choose to read. Like anything, you can't cheat your way out of it. There are hints and tips in helping you maintain good habits, and it is work, but you have to choose to do it. So those are my top 10 tips on how to maintain good habits and how to make good habits and maintain good habits. If you've got any that you feel are really successful, can you please let me know? I'm always interested in hearing about how to improve the amount I read, into maintaining how well I read, and I'm really interested to hear what you think. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe and comment. These things really help. I'm a new YouTube channel, and if you do like it, you can check out my website, Spread Book Joy, and I'm on all the social media channels listed below. Instagram, come and find me, come and chat to me. I'm really interested to hear what you think, and this is my first video that I'm doing face to camera. This is my New Year's resolution, so hopefully it's gone well. Also determined not to dress up for it, which is why I look the way I do right now, because the thought of having to get dressed up and, you know, make yourself ridiculously presentable means I will never ever film a video. So yeah, nice to meet you all. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and follow me on social media, and come and visit my website and hang out. It'd be great to see you there. Bye.